A 19-year-old bride walks toward a man she's never met, Raphael De Luca, the most feared name in the city. Everyone in that church expects her to be claimed, owned, broken. Her mother sold her like livestock. The guests whisper about her shame. Leora Vale expects nothing different. She's learned that survival means silence. But when Raphael looks at her, something shifts. What happens next will shatter everything she thought she knew about power, about herself, about what it means to be free. If you want to see how far this story goes, hit like and comment with your city. Now, let's begin. The church smelled like lilies and lies. Leora stood at the entrance, her fingers gripping a bouquet of white roses she didn't pick. The dress clung to her ribs, too tight in places, loose in others. Someone else had chosen it. Someone else had paid for it. Someone else had decided everything about this day except whether she would show up, and even that hadn't really been her choice. Her mother stood beside her, adjusting the veil with sharp, quick movements. "Stand straight," Eleanor Vale hissed. "And for once in your life, don't embarrass me." Leora didn't respond. She'd learned years ago that responding only made things worse. The organ music swelled, deep and ominous, and the doors opened. Every head turned. 200 people she barely knew, staring at her like she was something on display. Some looked curious. Most looked pitying. A few looked disgusted. She recognized the faces from town. The baker's wife, who always shortchanged her, the pharmacist who refused her mother credit, the women from the church auxiliary who smiled at Eleanor and ignored Leora entirely. They were all here to witness her fate. And at the end of the aisle, standing perfectly still, was Raphael De Luca. She'd never seen him before today, never spoken to him, never been asked if she wanted to marry him. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair combed back and a suit that probably cost more than her mother's house. His face was hard to read, sharp jaw, dark eyes, no expression at all. He looked like someone carved from stone, untouchable, dangerous. Everyone said he was a monster. Leora believed them. Her mother nudged her forward. The walk down the aisle felt endless. Each step echoed. Each breath felt too loud. She kept her eyes down, watching the white runner beneath her feet, counting the steps. 16, 17, 18. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down from every direction. Poor thing. Can you believe Eleanor actually went through with it? She's so young. Well, what did she expect, a girl like that? Leora's grip tightened on the bouquet. Girl like that. She'd heard variations of that phrase her entire life. A girl like that doesn't belong here. A girl like that should be grateful for anything she gets. A girl like that has no right to complain. Her mother had been saying it for years. 23, 24, 25. Raphael's eyes tracked her approach. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. When she finally reached him, Eleanor practically shoved her forward, then stepped back without a word. No hug, no reassurance, just relief that the burden was finally someone else's problem. The officiant began speaking, but Leora barely heard him. Her heart pounded too loud in her ears. Her hands were shaking. She focused on breathing, in, out, trying not to think about what came after this ceremony. Everyone knew what Raphael De Luca was. A crime lord. A man who controlled half the city through fear and violence. A man who'd made people disappear. And now she belonged to him. The officiant's voice droned on about commitment and partnership and unity, words that meant nothing in a room where everyone knew this was a transaction. Eleanor had debts. Raphael had money. Leora was the payment. The bride and groom have prepared their own vows, the officiant said. Leora's stomach dropped. No one had told her she needed to prepare anything. She looked up at Raphael for the first time, panic rising in her chest. He was already looking at her. "I'll go first," he said. His voice was deep, calm, controlled. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Not a ring box, an envelope. The church went silent. Raphael opened it and removed a folded document. He handed it to Leora without ceremony. "Read it," he said quietly. Her hands shook as she unfolded the pages. Legal text, dense paragraphs, official stamps. She scanned the words, trying to make sense of them. Hereby grants full autonomy and freedom. No legal obligation to remain. Entitled to financial independence. May leave at any time without penalty, retaliation, or consequence. She looked up at him, confused. What is this? Your freedom, Raphael said. He said it loud enough that the first few rows could hear. You don't owe me anything. You can leave right now if you want. Or you can stay. It's your choice. Murmurs rippled through the church. Eleanor's face went white. What the hell are you doing? Her mother hissed from the front pew. Raphael ignored her. His eyes stayed on Leora. I'm not going to force you into anything, he continued. Not this marriage, not my home, not my life. You're free to decide what you want. Leora stared at the document, then at him, then back at the document. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I don't understand, she whispered. You will, Raphael said. Take your time. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Should we continue? That depends on her, Raphael said. Every eye in the church was on Leora now, waiting, judging, expecting her to bolt, to cry, to make a scene. She looked down at the paper in her hands. Freedom. The word felt foreign. She'd never had it before. Didn't know what it looked like. Didn't trust it. But standing there in that dress she didn't choose, surrounded by people who'd spent years deciding what she was worth, Leora realized something. She had nothing to lose. I'll stay, she said quietly. Raphael nodded once. Then we'll continue. The ceremony finished in a blur. Rings exchanged, vows spoken, a kiss that lasted less than a second, and then it was over. Leora was married to a stranger. The reception was worse than the ceremony. It was held at Raphael's estate, a sprawling property outside town with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could fit the entire church congregation twice over. Everything was elegant, expensive, cold. Leora sat at the head table, Raphael beside her, while guests mingled and drank champagne and pretended this was a normal wedding. Eleanor appeared at her side within the first hour, her face tight with rage. What did you do? She demanded, leaning in close. What did you say to him? Nothing, Leora said. I didn't. Don't lie to me. He was supposed to pay off my debts. That was the agreement. Now he's pulling this freedom nonsense, and I look like a fool. I didn't ask for any of this. You never ask for anything. You just take and ruin everything. Eleanor's voice was sharp, vicious. You've been a burden your entire life, Leora. The least you could do is be useful for once. Oh, Leora looked down at her plate, her throat tight. She's not a burden. Both women turned. Raphael stood behind them, his expression unreadable. Excuse me, Eleanor said, trying to recover her composure. I said she's not a burden, Raphael repeated. His tone was even, but there was steel underneath. And you're not welcome here. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed. You can't. I can. This is my home. Leave. Two men in dark suits appeared from nowhere, flanking Eleanor on either side. You'll regret this, Eleanor spat, glaring at Leora. Both of you. Raphael didn't respond. He just watched as the men escorted her out, her protests echoing through the ballroom until the doors closed behind her. Leora stared at him, stunned. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Raphael said simply. He sat down beside her. You don't have to tolerate cruelty anymore. Not from her, not from anyone. She's my mother. That doesn't give her the right to treat you like you're worthless. Leora didn't know what to say. No one had ever defended her before. Not like that. The reception continued around them. People danced, ate, laughed. Leora sat in silence, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. At some point, Raphael leaned closer. Are you all right? She nodded automatically, then stopped. I don't know. That's honest. Why did you do this? She asked, finally voicing the question that had been burning in her mind since the ceremony. Why give me that document? Why marry me if you don't want anything from me? Raphael was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. Because I know what it's like to be powerless, he said eventually, and I know what it's like to be owned. I didn't want that for you. But you paid off my mother's debts. I did. Why? Because she would have sold you to someone worse. The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected. Regret. Who was she? Leora asked softly. Raphael's jaw tightened. Someone I couldn't save. He stood before she could ask anything else. I'll have someone show you to your room, he said. You should rest. My room? You'll have your own space, your own privacy. I'm not going to force you into anything you don't want. He paused. That includes sharing a bed. Leora watched him walk away, disappearing into the crowd of guests, leaving her alone at the head table. She looked down at the wedding ring on her finger, a simple gold band, elegant and understated. It felt heavy, foreign. A woman in a black dress approached her. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, professional demeanor. Mrs. DeLuca, she said. I'm Maria. I manage the household. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters. Leora stood, her legs unsteady. She followed Maria through hallways lined with art and marble, up a grand staircase, down another hallway, until they reached a set of double doors. Maria opened them, revealing a suite that was bigger than the entire house Leora had grown up in. This is your room, Maria said. Mr. DeLuca's quarters are on the opposite wing. If you need anything, there's a phone on the nightstand. Dial 0 and someone will assist you. Thank you, Leora managed. Maria nodded and left, closing the doors behind her. Leora stood in the center of the room, still wearing her wedding dress, and slowly turned in a circle. A 4-poster bed, a fireplace, a sitting area with a couch and bookshelves, windows overlooking the gardens, a door that led to a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. She walked to the window and looked out at the darkening sky. Somewhere below, the reception was still going. Music drifted up, muffled and distant. Leora pressed her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. She was free. She didn't know what that meant yet, but she was starting to think it might not be a trap. The first week was disorienting. Leora woke up every morning in that enormous bed, half expecting to find herself back in her mother's house. The whole wedding, a fever dream. But every morning, she opened her eyes to silk sheets and sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Raphael was barely there. She saw him at breakfast sometimes. He sat at one end of the long dining table, reading the newspaper, drinking black coffee. He'd nod at her when she entered, ask if she needed anything, then return to his paper. He never pushed, never demanded, never asked her to be anything other than what she was. It was unnerving. On the 4th day, Leora ventured out of her room and started exploring the estate. The library became her favorite place. 2 stories of books, leather chairs, a ladder on rails to reach the higher shelves. She spent hours there, pulling down volumes at random, losing herself in stories about people whose lives were nothing like hers. Maria checked on her regularly, bringing tea, asking if she needed anything. The staff treated her with polite deference, like she was actually the lady of the house, instead of a girl who'd been sold to pay off debts. On the 7th day, Leora found Raphael in his study. The door was half open. She knocked anyway. "Come in," he said without looking up. She stepped inside. The room was darker than the rest of the house, all wood paneling and heavy furniture. Raphael sat behind a desk covered in papers, a phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what he thinks," Raphael said into the phone. "Tell him if he doesn't have the shipment ready by Friday, we're done." He hung up and finally looked at Leora. "Sorry, what do you need?" "I don't need anything," she said. "I just wanted to talk." He set down his pen. "All right." Leora sat in one of the chairs across from his desk. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "This is strange," she said finally. "What is?" "All of it. Living here, being married to you, having space." She gestured vaguely. "I keep waiting for the catch. There isn't one." Everyone keeps saying that, but people don't just do things like this, not without wanting something. Raphael leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What do you think I want?" he asked. "I don't know. That's the problem. I told you at the wedding. I want you to have a choice, that's all. Why? Leora looked down at her hands. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Decide, choose. I've never had to before. Then start small, Raphael said. Pick something easy. What do you want for dinner tonight? She blinked. What? Dinner. What sounds good? I don't know. Then think about it. Tell Maria when you figure it out. He picked up his pen again. That's how it starts. Small choices, then bigger ones. Leora stood, still processing. Thank you, she said quietly. Raphael nodded, already back to his paperwork. She left the study and walked back to the library, her mind racing. Small choices. She could do that. Maybe. Just that. 2 weeks in, Leora started to notice things. The way Raphael's jaw tightened when someone interrupted him. The scar on his left hand that he covered with his watch. The fact that he took his coffee black but always ordered tea for her without asking what kind she wanted. She also noticed the people who came and went from the estate. Men in expensive suits. Women with cold eyes. Conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Raphael's world was darker than she'd imagined. But he kept her separate from it. Protected. Shielded. One afternoon, she was in the garden when she overheard 2 of Raphael's men talking near the hedges. Boss is getting soft, one of them muttered, letting her wander around like she owns the place. She does own the place, the other one replied. She's his wife. In name only. He hasn't even touched her. That's his business. It's weird. A man like him, married to a girl like that, and he's treating her like she's made of glass. Leora stepped back, her cheeks burning. She hurried back inside before they saw her. That night, she confronted Raphael at dinner. Your men think you're getting soft, she said abruptly. Raphael looked up from his plate. Excuse me? I heard them talking. They think it's strange that you're not, that we're not. She trailed off, frustrated. Not what? You know what? Raphael set down his fork. Let me be clear. What anyone thinks about our marriage is irrelevant. What matters is what you're comfortable with. Nothing more. But doesn't it affect your reputation? Your authority? My authority doesn't come from whether or not I sleep with my wife, Raphael said flatly. It comes from the fact that I built an empire from nothing, and I'm willing to protect it by any means necessary. If my men have a problem with how I run my personal life, they can find employment elsewhere. Leora stared at him. You'd fire them over this? Without hesitation. She didn't know what to say to that. Raphael softened slightly. I know this situation isn't normal. I know it's confusing, but I need you to understand something. I didn't marry you to own you. I married you to keep you safe. Everything else is up to you. What if I'm never ready? Leora asked quietly. What if I never want that? Then we have a marriage of convenience and mutual respect. I can live with that. Really? Really? Leora searched his face for any sign of deception. She found none. Okay, she said finally. They finished dinner in silence. 3 weeks in, Leora started to relax. She established routines, breakfast in the garden, afternoons in the library, evenings exploring the estate grounds. She started talking to the staff, Maria especially, who turned out to have a dry sense of humor and strong opinions about everything from politics to pastries. Raphael remained a constant but distant presence. He checked on her, made sure she had what she needed, then disappeared into his office or left the estate entirely for business she didn't ask about. It was easy to forget sometimes what he really was, until the night she saw him kill someone. She'd come downstairs for water, unable to sleep. The house was dark, quiet. She was padding toward the kitchen when she heard voices coming from Raphael's study. You thought you could steal from me? Raphael's voice. Cold, lethal. Please, I didn't. Don't lie. I have the receipts. You skimmed $30,000 from the last shipment. I can pay it back. I swear. Leora should have walked away, should have gone back upstairs, should have done anything except move closer to the partially open door. But she didn't. She stood in the hallway and watched through the crack as Raphael stood over a man on his knees. 2 other men flanked the door, the same ones she'd seen around the estate. You can't pay it back, Raphael said calmly. You already spent it. On what? Gambling? The man on the floor was crying now. Please, I have a family. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. Raphael pulled a gun from his jacket. Leora's breath caught. Wait. The shot was deafening. The man crumpled. Leora stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth, her heart slamming against her ribs. Raphael's eyes snapped to the door. He saw her. For one horrible second, they just stared at each other. Then Leora ran. She bolted up the stairs, her feet barely touching the floor, and slammed the door to her room behind her. She locked it, backed away, pressed herself against the far wall. Her whole body was shaking. She'd known what Raphael was. Everyone knew. But knowing and seeing were two different things. A few minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Leora. Raphael's voice, calm, even. Go away, she choked out. I need to talk to you. I said go away. Silence. Then, I'm not going to hurt you. You just killed someone. Yes, I did. The honesty of it was almost worse than the act itself. Stole from me, Raphael continued through the door. In my world, that's a death sentence. I'm sorry you saw it, but I'm not sorry I did it. Leora slid down the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. You're a monster. I know. I can't be here. Then leave. She looked up, stunned. What? If you want to leave, leave. The document I gave you is legally binding. You're free to go. You'd just let me walk out? Yes. After what I just saw? You're not involved in my business. You never will be. What you saw tonight doesn't change that. Leora pressed her forehead to her knees, her mind spinning. I don't understand you, she whispered. I don't expect you to, Raphael said quietly. But I need you to understand something. The man I killed tonight, he would have killed me if I'd let him live. Or worse, he would have gone after someone I care about. In my world, mercy is weakness, and weakness gets you killed. So you have no choice. I have a choice. I choose to survive. Leora didn't respond. After a long moment, she heard Raphael's footsteps retreating down the hall. She stayed on the floor until dawn, unable to sleep, unable to think, unable to decide if she was more afraid of Raphael or of the fact that part of her understood why he'd done it. Morning came. Leora didn't leave her room. Maria brought her breakfast on a tray, set it down without comment, and left. Around noon, there was another knock. It's me, Raphael said. Leora opened the door but didn't invite him in. He looked tired. Still in the same clothes from last night, his tie loosened, shadows under his eyes. I'm leaving for a few days, he said. Business in the city. Maria will be here if you need anything. Okay. If you decide to leave while I'm gone, that's fine. Your bank account is already set up. You'll have access to everything you need. I haven't decided anything yet. Raphael nodded. Take your time. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said without looking back. I never wanted you to see that side of me. I tried to keep it separate. I'm sorry I failed. Then he was gone. Leora stood in the doorway, listening to his footsteps fade. She closed the door and sat on her bed, staring at nothing. She thought about her mother's house, the cruelty, the constant judgment, the suffocating smallness of that life. She thought about the church, all those people looking at her like she was something to be pitied or scorned. She thought about Raphael handing her that document, defending her to her mother, asking her what she wanted for dinner. She thought about the gunshot. Small choices, he'd said. She made one. She stayed. Raphael returned on the fourth day. Leora was in the library when she heard his car pull up the drive. She'd been reading the same page for 20 minutes, the words blurring together, her mind elsewhere. The sound of the engine made her stomach clench. She stayed where she was, curled in the leather chair by the window, and waited. Footsteps in the hall. The study door opening and closing. Voices. Maria's, then Raphael's, too low to make out words. Then silence. Leora set her book aside and stood. Her legs felt unsteady. She'd spent the last 4 days thinking about what she'd seen, what it meant, what she was going to say when he came back. She'd rehearsed conversations in her head, tried out different explanations for why she'd stayed. None of them sounded right. She found him in the study, standing by the window with his back to the door. He'd changed clothes, dark slacks, white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept much. "You're still here," he said without turning around. "I'm still here." "Why?" Leora crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't know yet." Raphael turned to face her. His expression was guarded, careful. "You don't have to explain yourself to me." "Maybe I want to." He waited. Leora took a breath. "I keep thinking about my mother's house, how small it was, how every day felt the same, how everyone in that town had already decided what I was worth, and nothing I did would ever change their minds." She paused. "And then I think about here, this house, the way you've treated me, the fact that you've given me more respect in 3 weeks than I got in 19 years. That doesn't erase what you saw." "No, it doesn't." She met his eyes. "But it also doesn't erase everything else. You killed someone. I'm not going to pretend that's okay. But you also kicked my mother out of your house for being cruel to me. You gave me my own room. You asked me what I want for dinner." Her voice wavered slightly. "You're the first person who's ever asked me what I want." Raphael was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not a good man, Leora. I know. The things I do, the business I'm in, it's not going to change. I can keep it away from you, but I can't undo what I am. I'm not asking you to." He looked at her like he didn't quite believe what he was hearing. "Then what are you asking?" Leora pushed off the doorframe and walked into the room. She stopped a few feet away from him, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "I'm asking for time," she said. "I'm asking to figure out what this is, what we are, without pressure or expectations. I'm asking you to keep being honest with me, even when it's ugly." "I can do that." "And I'm asking you to let me stay, not because I have to, because I want to." Raphael's jaw tightened. For a second, she thought he might argue, might tell her she was making a mistake, but he didn't. "All right," he said quietly. Leora nodded and turned to leave. "Leora." She stopped. "Thank you," Raphael said, "for staying." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just left. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Raphael didn't hide his work from her anymore, not entirely. She'd see him on the phone, his voice clipped and cold as he dealt with suppliers, distributors, people who owed him money or loyalty or both. She'd watch him leave the estate in the middle of the night, dressed in all black, his expression grim. She didn't ask where he went. He didn't volunteer the information. But when he came back, sometimes hours later, sometimes days, he'd find her and tell her he was home. Just that. Nothing more. Like he needed her to know he'd returned. It was strange. Careful. A marriage that didn't look like any marriage she'd ever heard of. One evening, Leora was setting the table in the smaller dining room. She'd started eating there instead of the formal one, and Raphael had started joining her when Maria appeared with a concerned look. "There's someone at the gate," she said. "A woman. She says she's your mother." Leora's hands stilled. "What does she want?" "She didn't say, just that she needs to speak with you." Raphael appeared in the doorway before Leora could respond. "Tell her no." "Wait," Leora said. She set down the silverware she'd been holding. "Let her in." "Leora, I need to do this." Raphael's expression darkened. "She's only here because she wants something. I know, but I still need to do this." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, but I'm staying." Leora didn't argue. Eleanor arrived 10 minutes later, escorted by one of Raphael's men. She looked different than she had at the wedding. Thinner, harder, her clothes less polished. She swept into the room like she owned it, her eyes scanning everything with barely concealed envy. "Leora," she said, her voice tight. "You look well." "What do you want, Mom?" Eleanor's smile faltered. Can't a mother visit her daughter? Not when that mother sold her daughter to pay off gambling debts. The words came out sharper than Leora intended, but she didn't take them back. Eleanor's face flushed. I did what I had to do. You have no idea what kind of pressure I was under. You're right, I don't, because you never told me. You just handed me over like I was a piece of furniture. I gave you a better life, Eleanor snapped. Look at this place. Look at what you have now. You should be thanking me. Leora laughed, bitter and hollow. Thanking you? For what? For treating me like garbage my entire life? For making me feel worthless? For selling me to a stranger? That stranger is a criminal, Eleanor hissed, glancing at Raphael. You think this is better? You think he's going to take care of you? He already has, Leora said quietly. More than you ever did. Eleanor's expression twisted. You ungrateful little— Enough! Raphael's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood from where he'd been leaning against the wall, his posture relaxed but his eyes cold. You've said your piece. Now leave. This is between me and my daughter. Your daughter is my wife, which means anything that involves her involves me, and I'm telling you to leave. Eleanor turned to Leora, desperation creeping into her voice. I need money, just enough to cover rent, a few thousand. You have it now. You could help me. No? Leora said. What? I said no. You don't get to show up here and ask me for money after everything you've done. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother a long time ago. Eleanor's face went pale, then red. You'll regret this. Both of you. Raphael moved toward the door and opened it. Goodbye, Eleanor. Eleanor looked between them, fury and disbelief warring on her face. Then she spun on her heel and stormed out. The front door slammed a moment later. Leora stood frozen, her heart pounding, her hand shaking. She'd never stood up to her mother before, never said no, never pushed back. It felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. You okay? Raphael asked. Leora nodded, then shook her head. I don't know. That was overdue. She let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, it was. Raphael walked over and poured her a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. He handed it to her without a word. She took it, grateful, and drank. She'll come back, Raphael said. I know. And when she does, the answer is still no. Leora looked at him. You sound sure of that. I am. People like Eleanor don't change, they just get more desperate. What if she tries something? Then I'll handle it. The certainty in his voice should have been unsettling. Instead, it was oddly comforting. Thank you, Leora said, for being here. Always. The following week, Raphael had to leave town again. How long? Leora asked as he packed a bag in his study. 3 days, maybe 4. He glanced at her. Will you be all right? I'm not a child, Raphael. I didn't say you were. I'm asking if you'll be all right. Leora softened. I'll be fine. Maria's here. The staff is here. I'll survive. If you need anything, I'll call. I know. Raphael zipped the bag and straightened. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but couldn't find the words. Be careful, Leora said. His expression shifted, something warm flickering in his eyes. I will. He left an hour later. The house felt emptier without him. Leora hadn't realized how much of a presence he'd become until he wasn't there. She wandered the halls, restless, unable to settle. On the second day, she decided to go into town. She hadn't left the estate since the wedding, hadn't wanted to face the people who'd watched her walk down that aisle, who'd whispered about her, judged her. But she was tired of hiding. Maria arranged for a car and a driver, one of Raphael's men, silent and professional. The drive into town took 20 minutes, the landscape shifting from manicured estates to small houses to the main street with its shops and cafes. Leora asked the driver to drop her near the bookstore. She needed something to read, something to distract her from the quiet of the house. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. The store was small, cramped, shelves packed with dusty volumes. An older man sat behind the counter, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when she walked in, and his expression shifted from neutral to cold. We don't want any trouble, he said. Leora stopped. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to buy a book. Your husband's caused enough problems in this town. We don't need his wife coming around too. I'm not my husband. You married him. That makes you part of it. Leora felt her face flush. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. She turned and left before he could say anything else. Outside, she stood on the sidewalk, her chest tight. She'd known people in town didn't like Raphael, but she hadn't expected them to hate her by association. She walked down the street, trying to shake off the encounter, when she heard her name. Leora? She turned. A girl about her age stood a few feet away, dark hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing an apron dusted with flour. Claire? Leora said, surprised. Claire had worked at the bakery when they were teenagers. She'd been one of the few people who'd been kind to Leora, though they'd never been close. I heard you got married, Claire said, walking over. To Raphael De Luca. Yeah. Claire's expression was hard to read. How is that? Complicated. I bet. Claire glanced back at the bakery. I'm on break. Want to get coffee? Leora hesitated, then nodded. Sure. They walked to a small cafe down the street. Claire ordered 2 coffees and they sat at a table by the window. So, Claire said, stirring sugar into her cup, is it true? The things people say about him. Depends on what they're saying. That he runs half the city, that he's dangerous, that people who cross him disappear. Leora didn't answer right away. Some of it's true. Claire raised an eyebrow. And you're okay with that? I didn't say I was okay with it. I said, it's complicated. Does he hurt you? No. The answer came quickly, firmly. He's never hurt me. Claire looked skeptical. Then why marry him? I told you, it's complicated. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. People in town think you're crazy, Claire said finally, or desperate. Probably both. Claire laughed, a short, surprised sound. At least you're honest. Leora smiled despite herself. It's all I have left. For what it's worth, Claire said, her voice softer now. I never thought you deserved the way people treated you, your mom especially. Thanks. I mean it. You were always quiet, kept to yourself. People acted like that made you weird. It did make me weird. No, it made you smart. You didn't waste time trying to impress people who weren't worth it. Leora looked at her, genuinely touched. I appreciate that. They talked for another 20 minutes about the bakery, about Claire's life, about nothing important. It was normal, easy. The first real conversation Leora had had with someone her own age in years. When they left the cafe, Claire hugged her. If you ever need to talk, she said, or just get away from that house, come find me. I will. Leora walked back to where the driver was waiting, feeling lighter than she had in days. Maybe she wasn't completely alone in this town after all. Raphael came home on the 4th day, later than expected. Leora was in the garden when she heard the car. She looked up to see him walking toward her, his jacket slung over one shoulder, his tie loose. He looked exhausted. How was the trip? She asked. Long. He sat down on the bench beside her. How was town? She blinked. How did you know I went into town? The driver told me. Of course he did. Raphael didn't apologize. Did something happen? Leora told him about the bookstore, about Claire, about the coffee. He listened without interrupting. The man at the bookstore was out of line, Raphael said when she finished. He was scared. That doesn't give him the right to treat you like that. You can't control what people think of me. No, but I can make sure they're respectful. Leora shook her head. Don't. It'll only make things worse. Raphael looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. Did you at least get a book? He asked instead. No, I left before I could. He pulled something from his bag, a small, wrapped package. He handed it to her. Leora unwrapped it to find a book. Hardcover, new, the kind she'd been looking at in the library. How did you know? She asked. I pay attention. She looked at him, something warm unfurling in her chest. Thank you. You're welcome. They sat in silence, the evening air cool around them. Leora opened the book and started reading. Raphael leaned back, his eyes closed, just breathing. It was comfortable, easy. And for the first time since the wedding, Leora thought maybe this could work. Mas. 2 days later, everything changed. Leora was in the kitchen with Maria, learning how to make pasta from scratch, when one of Raphael's men burst through the door. "Where's the boss?" he demanded. "In his study," Maria said, alarm creeping into her voice. "What's wrong?" The man didn't answer. He just ran. Leora and Maria exchanged a look, then followed. They found Raphael in the hallway, already on the phone, his expression grim. "When?" he snapped into the receiver. A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "Get everyone to the safe house, now." He hung up and looked at Leora. "You need to pack a bag," he said. "What? Why?" "Someone leaked information about my operation. The authorities are moving in. It's not safe here." Leora's stomach dropped. "The authorities? You mean the police?" "Among others. I don't have time to explain. Just pack. Essentials only. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Raphael, Leora." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Trust me. Please." She nodded and ran upstairs. Her hands shook as she threw clothes into a bag. She grabbed her phone, the book Raphael had given her, a few other things she couldn't leave behind. Her mind raced. The police. A raid. She'd known Raphael's business was illegal, but she hadn't thought about what that meant in practical terms. She met him downstairs. He had a bag too, and 2 more men flanking him. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. That's all you need to know right now." They loaded into a black SUV, Raphael in the front, Leora in the back with one of his men. The driver pulled out fast, gravel spraying. Leora looked back at the estate, shrinking in the distance. "What about Maria, the staff?" "They'll be fine," Raphael said. "They're not involved. The authorities know that." "But you are." "Yes." Leora swallowed hard. "What happens if they catch you?" Raphael didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low. "They won't." They drove for over an hour, winding through back roads and small towns. Leora watched the landscape blur past, her mind spinning. She thought about the life she'd started building at the estate, the library, the garden, the quiet mornings and the careful conversations. All of it suddenly felt fragile. They pulled up to a house on the edge of a lake, smaller than the estate, but still comfortable, isolated. "We'll stay here until things settle," Raphael said as they got out. Inside, the house was furnished but impersonal. A safe house, just like he'd said. Raphael immediately went to the windows, checking sightlines, exits. His men did the same. Leora stood in the middle of the living room, feeling useless. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Raphael looked at her, surprised. "Nothing. Just stay inside. Stay safe. I can help." "Leora, I'm not helpless." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, help me check the perimeter. Make sure all the doors and windows lock." They worked in silence, moving through the house together. It was strange, this version of domesticity, checking locks and exits instead of setting the table or choosing what to read. When they finished, Raphael sat down heavily on the couch. He looked more tired than she'd ever seen him. "How bad is this?" Leora asked, sitting beside him. "Bad, but not catastrophic. I have people handling it. We just need to wait." "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week." Leora nodded. She wanted to ask more. Who had leaked the information? What the authorities knew? What would happen if they couldn't fix this? But Raphael's expression told her he didn't have answers yet, so instead, she just sat with him. "I'm sorry," Raphael said after a while. "For what?" "For dragging you into this. You didn't sign up for this part." "I signed up for you," Leora said quietly. "This comes with it." He looked at her, something raw in his eyes. "You could still leave, take the document, disappear. I'd make sure you were protected." "I know. Then why don't you?" Leora thought about it. About the girl she'd been 4 weeks ago, standing in that church, believing she had no choices. About the woman she was becoming, sitting in a safe house with a man who'd killed someone in front of her, and still somehow made her feel safer than she'd ever felt in her life. "Because I'm not done figuring this out yet," she said. Raphael reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, deliberate, gentle, without hesitation. "Neither am I," he said. They sat like that, hands linked, while the sun set over the lake and the world outside tried to tear everything apart. They stayed at the lake house for 6 days. The first 2 were tense. Raphael spent most of his time on the phone, his voice low and clipped as he barked orders to people Leora couldn't see. His men rotated shifts, one always awake, always watching. Leora tried to stay out of the way, but the house was small enough that there was nowhere to hide. On the 3rd day, Raphael's phone rang at 2 in the morning. Leora woke to the sound of his voice in the next room, sharper than usual. "What do you mean they have him?" She sat up, her heart pounding. "No, don't do anything yet. I'll handle it." The call ended. Footsteps. Raphael appeared in her doorway, his face tight. "Get dressed," he said. "We need to leave." "What happened?" "They arrested one of my people. He knows too much. If he talks—" Raphael stopped himself. "Just get dressed. We're moving." Leora didn't argue. She pulled on jeans and a sweater, grabbed her bag. They were in the car 10 minutes later, driving through the dark with no headlights until they hit the main road. "Where are we going?" Leora asked. "Another safe house, farther out." "Raphael, what's going on?" He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "The leak wasn't random. Someone inside my organization sold me out. I don't know who yet, but until I do, everyone's a suspect. Even the people protecting us right now? Especially them." Leora looked at the man in the back seat, young, maybe 30, with a scar above his left eyebrow. He stared straight ahead, his expression blank. "You don't trust him?" she whispered. "I don't trust anyone," Raphael said, "except you." The words hung between them. Leora didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They drove for 3 hours, stopping only once for gas. Raphael paid in cash, kept his face turned away from the cameras. When they finally pulled up to the new safe house, a cabin deep in the woods, no neighbors for miles, the sun was starting to rise. Raphael sent his man to scout the perimeter. The moment they were alone, he turned to Leora. "I need you to listen carefully," he said. "If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." "If something happens," he repeated, his voice firm, "there's a lockbox under the floorboards in the bedroom. Inside is cash, new identification, and a phone with one contact. Call that number. Tell them who you are. They'll get you somewhere safe." Leora's throat tightened. "Raphael, promise me." "I promise." He nodded, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "Good." They spent the rest of the morning securing the cabin. Raphael checked every window, every door, every possible entry point. Leora watched him work, this version of him that was all sharp edges and cold efficiency. "You've done this before," she said, "more times than I can count. Doesn't it get exhausting? Always running, always looking over your shoulder?" Raphael paused, a screwdriver in his hand. "Yes." "Then why do you do it?" "Because the alternative is worse." "Which is?" "Being powerless." He turned to look at her. "I grew up with nothing. No money, no family, no options. I watched people I cared about suffer because they couldn't protect themselves. I swore I'd never be that helpless again." "So you built an empire?" "I built a cage," Raphael said quietly. "A comfortable one, but still a cage." Leora walked over to him. "You could leave, walk away, start over somewhere else." "With what? Everything I am is tied to what I've built. Without it, I'm nobody." "That's not true." Raphael set down the screwdriver and faced her fully. "You don't know what I've done, Leora, the things I've had to do to survive. If you did—" "I saw you kill someone," she interrupted. "I know you're not innocent, but I also know you're not just what you do." "How can you be sure?" "Because you gave me a choice when no one else would. Because you defend me. Because you're standing here telling me how to escape if things go bad instead of pretending everything's fine." She hesitated. "Because you're more afraid of me getting hurt than you are of losing everything." Raphael stared at her, something shifting in his expression. For a moment, she thought he might say something, might close the distance between them. Instead, his phone rang. He answered it, his face going hard. When? A pause. Are you sure? Another pause. Handle it. I'll be there tomorrow. He hung up and looked at Leora. They found the leak, he said. It was Marcus. He's been with me for 8 years. What are they going to do to him? Raphael didn't answer right away. What needs to be done? Leora felt her stomach turn. You mean kill him? He betrayed me, put everyone at risk. There's no coming back from that. So you just execute him? Yes. The bluntness of it still shocked her, even after everything she'd seen. And you're okay with that? I have to be. No, you don't. You could... Could what, Leora? Let him go? Give him a stern warning? Raphael's voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. This isn't a normal life. There are no second chances. You make an example or you lose control. That's not leadership. That's fear. It's survival, and it's kept me alive this long. Leora shook her head. I don't believe that's the only way. Then you're naive. The word stung. Leora stepped back, her jaw tight. Maybe I am, but at least I'm not so far gone that I think murder is the only option. Raphael's expression shifted, something like regret flashing across his face. Leora, forget it. She turned and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She'd known what Raphael was, known what his world looked like. But hearing him talk about killing someone he'd worked with for nearly a decade, like it was inevitable, necessary, it made her stomach turn. A knock on the door. Go away, she said. I'm coming in anyway. Raphael opened the door and stepped inside. He didn't sit, just stood there looking uncomfortable. You're right, he said finally. Leora looked up, surprised. What? You're right, it is fear. Everything I do, every decision I make, it comes from being afraid of losing control, of being powerless again. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how to do this any other way. Then learn. It's not that simple. It never is. Leora stood, but you told me to start with small choices. Maybe you should take your own advice. Raphael was quiet for a long moment. Then, what would you do? If you were me? I'd find out why Marcus betrayed you. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe someone threatened him, or his family. Maybe there's more to the story. And if there isn't? If he just did it for money? Then you exile him. Take everything from him. Make sure he can never come back, but you don't kill him. Raphael looked at her like she'd suggested something impossible. That's not how this works. Then change how it works. I can't. You won't. They stared at each other, the space between them charged with frustration and something else Leora couldn't name. I'll think about it, Raphael said finally. That's all I'm asking. He nodded and left. Leora sat back down on the bed, her heart racing. She didn't know if he'd actually listen, didn't know if mercy was even possible in his world, but she had to try. Because if she didn't, what was the point of staying? Raphael left the next morning. I'll be back tonight, he said, standing by the door with his jacket on. Don't leave the cabin. Don't answer the door for anyone except me or Thomas. He nodded at the man who'd stayed behind to guard her. Be careful, Leora said. Raphael hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was quick, almost awkward, but it sent warmth spreading through her chest. I will, he said. Then he was gone. The cabin felt too quiet without him. Leora tried to read, tried to distract herself, but her mind kept circling back to what Raphael was doing, who he was meeting, whether he'd actually consider what she'd said. Thomas stayed outside, doing perimeter checks every hour. Leora watched him through the window, this stranger tasked with keeping her safe, and wondered if Raphael trusted him, or if he was just another suspect. Around noon, a car pulled up the dirt road. Leora's heart jumped. Thomas immediately moved toward it, his hand on his gun. But the person who stepped out wasn't a threat. It was Eleanor. Leora's blood went cold. How had she found them? Thomas blocked her path. You need to leave, now. I'm here to see my daughter, Eleanor said, her voice sharp. She doesn't want to see you. Let her tell me that herself. Leora stepped outside before Thomas could respond. How did you find me? Eleanor's smile was brittle. I have friends, people who owe me favors. Did you really think you could hide? What do you want? I want what I'm owed. You owe me, Leora, after everything I did for you. You did nothing for me, Leora said, her voice steady. You fed me and put a roof over my head because you had to, but you never loved me, never wanted me. You made that clear every single day. Eleanor's face twisted. I sacrificed everything for you, my youth, my opportunities. You sacrificed nothing. You used me as an excuse for every bad decision you made. And when things got hard, you sold me. To give you a better life. To save yourself. Leora stepped closer. And now you want money. That's all this is. You don't care about me. You never did. Eleanor's composure cracked. You think you're so much better now? Living in that man's house, pretending you're somebody? You're still just a scared little girl who doesn't know what she's doing. Maybe, Leora said. But at least I'm not you. The words hit like a slap. Eleanor recoiled, her face flushing red. You'll regret this, she hissed. When he gets tired of you, when he throws you out, you'll come crawling back, and I won't be there. Good, Leora said. I don't want you there. Eleanor stared at her, hatred burning in her eyes. Then she turned and got back in her car, slamming the door. Leora watched her drive away, her hands shaking. Thomas walked over. You all right? Yeah. Leora took a breath. I'm fine. But she wasn't. Seeing Eleanor, hearing that venom, it brought everything back. The years of cruelty, the constant belittling, the feeling of being worthless. She went back inside and sat on the couch, trying to calm down. Thomas followed her in. Should I tell Mr. DeLuca about this? No. He has enough to worry about. He'd want to know. I said no. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. Leora spent the rest of the afternoon replaying the conversation in her head. She'd stood up to Eleanor, said things she'd wanted to say for years. It should have felt empowering. Instead, it just felt exhausting. Raphael came back after dark. Leora heard the car, the footsteps on the porch. She met him at the door. How did it go? She asked. Raphael looked tired, but not defeated. I talked to Marcus. And? His sister's sick, cancer. He needed money for treatment. Someone offered him $50,000 to leak information about my operation. Leora's chest tightened. So he did it to save his sister. Yeah. What are you going to do? Raphael walked past her into the cabin. He poured himself a drink, downed it, then poured another. I'm paying for her treatment, he said. All of it. And I'm exiling Marcus. He can't come back. Can't work for me or anyone connected to me. But he gets to live. Leora stared at him. You're serious. You said to find another way, so I did. She crossed the room and hugged him before she could stop herself. Raphael went rigid for a second. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. My people think I'm losing my edge. Half of them are questioning my judgment. Let them question. You made the right call. Raphael pulled back slightly to look at her. How do you know? Because you're still the person who gave me a choice when I had none. That doesn't change just because your world is hard. He searched her face, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't like the quick peck on her forehead. This was deliberate, intense, filled with all the things they hadn't said. Leora froze for half a second, then kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I didn't plan that, Raphael said. I'm not complaining. A smile tugged at his mouth, the first real one she'd seen in days. Good. They stood there, inches apart, the tension between them shifting into something else entirely. Leora, Raphael said quietly, I need you to know something. I didn't marry you to save you. I mean, I did, but that's not the only reason. Then why? Because when I met you, I saw someone who'd been beaten down but wasn't broken. Someone who'd survived despite everything. And I thought, he stopped, struggling with the words. I thought maybe if I could give you a chance to be free, it would make up for the person I couldn't save. Who was she? My sister. Raphael's voice went rough. I couldn't let another girl be destroyed because no one cared enough to stop it. So you married me. So I married you. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about her and started being about you. Leora reached up and touched his face. I'm not her. You don't owe me anything. I know, but I want to give you everything anyway. She kissed him again, softer this time. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. What happens now? She asked. Now we go back. Face whatever comes. Together. Together, Leora repeated. It felt like a promise. They returned to the estate 2 days later. The authorities had raided it while they were gone. Maria met them at the door, her face pale. They tore through everything, she said. Took files, electronics, questioned the staff. It was chaos. Raphael's jaw tightened. Did they arrest anyone? No. They didn't find what they were looking for. Good. Raphael spent the next few hours surveying the damage, making calls, rebuilding what had been broken. Leora watched him work, this version of him that was relentless and focused, refusing to let the rage shake him. But that night, when they were alone, she saw the cracks. He sat in his study, staring at the papers scattered across his desk, his shoulders tense. Leora walked in and sat across from him. Talk to me. They're not going to stop, Raphael said. This was just the beginning. They'll keep coming until they find something that sticks. Then we'll deal with it. We? You think I'm going anywhere? Raphael looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. I wouldn't blame you if you did. I know, but I'm not going to. Leora leaned forward. You told me I had a choice. I'm choosing this, choosing you, whatever that means. Raphael stood and walked around the desk. He pulled her up and kissed her, hard and desperate, like he was trying to convince himself she was real. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he said. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed, a rough surprise sound. Then he took her hand and led her upstairs. They didn't talk about what it meant, didn't define what was happening between them. They just lay together in his bed, her head on his chest, his arms around her, and let the world outside fade away. For the first time since the wedding, Leora felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning, Raphael got a call that changed everything. Leora was still asleep when she heard his voice in the hallway, sharp and urgent. You're sure? When? A pause. I'll handle it. She got up and found him already dressed, his expression grim. What's wrong? She asked. There's a town festival today, the annual harvest fair. Your mother's going to be there. So? So someone told me she's planning to make a scene, publicly accuse you of being sold, of being my property. She wants to humiliate you in front of everyone. Leora's stomach dropped. Why would she do that? Because she's desperate and vindictive and you cut her off. Raphael's voice was hard. She wants to hurt you. Then I won't go. That's exactly what she wants, for you to hide to prove her right. Leora shook her head. I can't face her in front of the whole town. Yes, you can. Raphael walked over and took her hands. You stood up to her at the cabin. You can do it again. That was different. That was private. And this is your chance to show everyone who you really are, not the girl they thought they knew, the woman you've become. Leora looked at him, fear and determination warring in her chest. Will you be there? She asked. Every step of the way. She took a deep breath. Okay, let's go. The festival was already crowded by the time they arrived. Main Street had been blocked off, lined with booths selling everything from handmade jewelry to kettle corn. A small stage had been set up near the town square, where a local band played bluegrass music. Children ran through the crowds with balloons and cotton candy. It looked wholesome, innocent, Nothing like the confrontation Leora knew was waiting for her. Raphael kept close as they walked through the crowd. People noticed them immediately. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes followed them. Whispers rippled outward like a stone dropped in water. "Just keep walking," Raphael murmured. Leora's hands were clammy. She wiped them on her jeans, trying to look calm. She'd dressed simply, jeans, a white blouse, boots, nothing that screamed wealth or power. She wanted to look like herself, not like someone playing a role. They passed the bakery booth. Claire was there, arranging cupcakes on tiered displays. When she saw Leora, her face brightened. "Hey," she called out. "You came." Leora managed a smile. "Yeah, I came." "Good for you." Claire glanced at Raphael, then back at Leora. "Let me know if you need anything, okay?" "Thanks." They kept moving. Raphael's hand found the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and grounding. She leaned into it slightly, grateful. They were near the center of the square when Eleanor appeared. She stepped out from behind a booth selling handmade quilts, her face already flushed with anger or alcohol or both. She wasn't alone. 3 other women stood with her, women Leora recognized from the church auxiliary, the same ones who'd whispered about her at the wedding. "There she is," Eleanor announced loudly. "The girl who thinks she's too good for her own mother now." Heads turned. The crowd around them slowed, people stopping to watch. Leora's throat went dry. "Mom, don't do this." "Don't do what? Tell the truth? That you were sold like cattle to pay off my debts? That you're living in luxury while I'm struggling to survive?" The words carried across the square. More people stopped. The band finished their song and didn't start another one. The silence grew heavy. Raphael's hand tightened on Leora's back. "Walk away," he said quietly. "You don't have to engage with this." But Leora stood her ground. She'd run from Eleanor her whole life. She wasn't going to run anymore. "You're the one who sold me," Leora said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You made that choice. You took his money and handed me over without asking what I wanted. Because I had no choice. You have no idea what kind of pressure I was under. You always have a choice. You just chose yourself, like you always do." Eleanor's face went scarlet. "How dare you? After everything I sacrificed for you." "You didn't sacrifice anything," Leora interrupted. "You resented me from the day I was born. You made sure I knew I was a burden, that I was worthless, that no one would ever want me. And when you had the chance to get rid of me, you took it." One of the women next to Eleanor, Mrs. Patterson, who ran the church bake sales, stepped forward. "Now, Eleanor, maybe we should—" "Stay out of this, Helen," Eleanor snapped. She turned back to Leora, her eyes wild. "You think you're free now? You think he's not going to use you the same way? He's a criminal, Leora, a thug. Everyone knows what he is." "I know what he is," Leora said. "Then you're a fool." "Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool who chose her own path than someone who spent her whole life blaming everyone else for her failures." Eleanor lunged forward. Raphael moved instantly, stepping between them, his presence a wall. "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Eleanor stopped short, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. Her eyes darted around the crowd, looking for support, but most people just stared. "This isn't over," Eleanor hissed. "Yes, it is," Raphael said. He pulled out his phone and made a call, never taking his eyes off Eleanor. "It's me, Eleanor Vale. She's at the town festival causing a disturbance. Remove her." "You can't do that," Eleanor sputtered. "I just did." 2 men in suits appeared from the crowd within minutes. Not Raphael's usual security, but private contractors who worked festivals and events. They approached Eleanor with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to leave," one of them said. "This is a public event. You're creating a disturbance. Please come with us." Eleanor looked around desperately, but no one came to her defense. The women who'd been standing with her had already melted back into the crowd. Helen Patterson looked embarrassed. The other 2 wouldn't meet Eleanor's eyes. "Fine," Eleanor spat. "But this isn't over. You hear me, Leora? This isn't over." The security guards escorted her away. The crowd watched in silence until she disappeared around the corner. Then slowly, carefully, conversations resumed. The band started playing again. People drifted back to the booths, but Leora could still feel the weight of their stares. Raphael turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Let's get out of here." "No." Leora straightened her shoulders. "I'm not leaving. If I leave now, she wins. Everyone will think I'm ashamed." "You have nothing to be ashamed of." "I know, but they don't know that. Not yet." Raphael studied her face, then nodded. "All right. What do you want to do?" "I want to walk through this festival like I have every right to be here. Because I do." A small smile tugged at Raphael's mouth. "Then let's walk." They moved through the crowd slowly, deliberately. Leora kept her head up, met people's eyes when they stared. Some looked away quickly. Others nodded, unsure how to respond. A few smiled tentatively. They stopped at a booth selling handmade pottery. The woman running it, middle-aged, kind face, greeted them warmly. "These are beautiful," Leora said, picking up a small vase. "Thank you, dear. I make them all myself." "How much?" $20. Leora pulled out cash and bought the vase. The woman wrapped it carefully in newspaper and handed it over. "You're Leora, aren't you?" she said. "Eleanor's daughter." Leora braced herself. "Yes. I'm sorry about what happened just now. That was uncalled for." The woman's expression was sympathetic. "I've known Eleanor a long time. She's always been her own worst enemy. Don't let her poison you." "I'm trying not to." "Good girl." They moved on. At the next booth, Leora bought a jar of local honey. At the one after that, a small painting of the lake. Each purchase was a statement, a refusal to hide or apologize for existing. Raphael stayed beside her the whole time, a quiet presence. He didn't hover, didn't speak unless she spoke to him first. He was just there, solid and steady. They were near the stage when someone called out, "Leora!" She turned to see Claire jogging over, slightly out of breath. "Hey, I just wanted to say, that took guts, what you said to your mom." "Thanks. I'm not sure it was smart, but it was overdue," Claire said firmly. "She's been talking trash about you for years. Someone needed to call her out. I didn't mean to cause a scene." "She caused the scene. You just didn't back down." Claire glanced at Raphael, then back at Leora. "Listen, a bunch of us are getting drinks tonight at the pub. You should come. Both of you." Leora blinked, surprised. "Really?" "Yeah, I mean, if you want, no pressure." Leora looked at Raphael. He shrugged slightly, leaving the choice to her. "Okay," Leora said. "We'll come." "Great, around 8?" Claire grinned and jogged back to her booth. Raphael raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "Small choices," Raphael said. "Small choices," Leora agreed. They stayed at the festival another hour. Leora's nerves gradually settled. People stopped staring quite so obviously. A few even approached her. Not friendly, exactly, but curious. Willing to give her a chance. By the time they left, Leora felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. The pub was crowded when they arrived that night. It was a small place, all dark wood and dim lighting, with a jukebox in the corner playing classic rock. Claire waved them over to a table in the back where 5 other people sat, 3 women and 2 men, all around Leora's age. "Everyone, this is Leora," Claire said, "and her husband, Raphael." The introductions went around the table. Sarah, who worked at the hardware store, Mike, who managed the auto shop, Jessica and Emma, who were sisters and ran a catering business, and Tom, who taught at the elementary school. They were polite but cautious. Leora could see them trying to reconcile what they'd heard about Raphael with the man sitting quietly beside her, drinking whiskey and saying little. "So," Sarah said after a few minutes of awkward small talk, "what's it like being married to the most notorious guy in the county?" "Sarah," Claire hissed. "What? I'm just asking." Raphael took a sip of his drink, his expression unreadable. Leora decided to be honest. "It's complicated. He's not what people think." "But he is dangerous, right?" Mike asked. "I mean, everyone knows." Mike, Tom interrupted. Maybe we shouldn't. It's fine, Raphael said. His voice was calm, even. You want to know if the rumors are true? Some of them are. I run businesses that operate outside the law. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I've never heard anyone who didn't come at me first. The table went silent. Well, Jessica said finally, at least you're honest. It's all I've got, Raphael said with a slight shrug. The tension broke. Someone laughed. The conversation shifted to safer topics: the festival, town gossip, complaints about the mayor's new parking regulations. Leora watched Raphael navigate the evening with surprising ease. He didn't dominate the conversation, didn't try to charm anyone. He just listened, answered questions when asked, and slowly the group relaxed around him. An hour in, Claire leaned over to Leora. He's not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know, someone scarier, more obviously dangerous. He can be, but not here, not with me. Claire studied her. You really care about him? It wasn't a question, but Leora answered anyway. Yeah, I do. Does he care about you? Leora glanced at Raphael, who was explaining something about car engines to Mike with more patience than she would have expected. Yeah, he does. Good, Claire said. You deserve someone who cares. They stayed until past midnight. By the time they left, Leora had exchanged numbers with Claire and Sarah. Jessica had invited her to a book club. Tom had asked if she wanted to volunteer at the school's literacy program. Small connections. Small possibilities. On the drive home, Raphael was quiet. You okay? Leora asked. I'm not used to that, he said. Used to what? Being treated like a normal person, having conversations that aren't about business or favors or threats. Did you like it? Raphael was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I did. Leora reached over and took his hand. He laced his fingers through hers and didn't let go the rest of the drive. But the next week was the calmest Leora had experienced since the wedding. The authorities seemed to have backed off, at least temporarily. Raphael's business stabilized. The estate felt less like a fortress and more like a home. Leora started volunteering at the school twice a week, helping kids with reading. She went to Claire's book club. She had coffee with Sarah and Jessica. Slowly, carefully, she built a life that was hers. Raphael noticed the changes. He didn't comment on them directly, but she caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. One evening, she found him in his study going through paperwork. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. What happens next, with us, I mean? Raphael set down his pen. What do you want to happen? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. He stood and walked around the desk, leaning against it. We could stay like this, married on paper, living separate lives under the same roof. Is that what you want? No. Leora's heart skipped. Then what do you want? Raphael looked at her for a long moment. I want you to be happy, whatever that looks like. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. I can't give you a normal life, Leora. I can't promise safety or stability or a future without danger, but I can promise that I'll protect you, that I'll respect you, and that you'll always have a choice. Leora walked over to him. What if I choose you? Then you'd be making a mistake. That's my call to make. Raphael reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You're sure? I'm terrified, but yeah, I'm sure. He pulled her close and kissed her, slow and deep. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. Stop saying that. It's true. Maybe, but you're stuck with me anyway. Raphael smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. I can live with that. They went upstairs together. This time, there was no hesitation, no careful distance. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, testing boundaries, building trust. Now, there was just them. Afterward, Leora lay with her head on Raphael's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Tell me something, she said. Something you've never told anyone. Raphael was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I'm scared, he said finally. All the time. Scared of losing control. scared of being betrayed, scared that everything I've built will collapse. And now? Now I'm scared of losing you. Leora lifted her head to look at him. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. Neither can you. But we're here now. That counts for something. Raphael pulled her closer. Yeah, it does. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and for the first time in his life, Raphael let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have something real. So, 3 days later, everything fell apart. Leora was in the garden when she heard shouting from inside the house. She ran toward the sound and found Raphael in the foyer, his face white with rage, a phone crushed in his hand. What happened? She demanded. Marcus talked, Raphael said, his voice shaking. The man I exiled, the one whose sister I'm paying for. He went to the authorities, gave them everything. Leora's stomach dropped. Everything? Names, locations, operations, enough to bring down half my organization. Can you stop it? I don't know. My lawyers are working on it, but... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. This is bad, Leora. Worse than the raid. They're talking about RICO charges, federal prosecution. What does that mean? It means I could be looking at 20 years, maybe more. The words hit her like a physical blow. No, there has to be something. There isn't. Not unless I disappear. Leave the country. Start over somewhere else. Then do that. Raphael looked at her. I can't. Why not? Because running means leaving you, and I'm not going to do that. Leora's eyes burned. Raphael, if you stay, they'll arrest you. Probably. Then you have to go. And what happens to you? I'll be fine. The document you gave me isn't enough to protect you from association charges. They could come after you too, claim you were complicit. Then I'll fight it. Leora, I'm not the helpless girl you married anymore, she said fiercely. I can take care of myself, but I can't watch you throw your life away because you're trying to protect me. Raphael grabbed her shoulders. You don't understand. Leaving you would destroy me more than any prison sentence. And watching you get arrested will destroy me. Leora shot back. So we're at an impasse. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. Maria appeared in the doorway. Sir, your lawyer is on the line. Raphael let go of Leora and took the call. She watched his expression shift from anger to resignation to something that looked like defeat. He hung up and turned to her. I have 48 hours, Chet, he said. After that, the indictments come down. They're offering a deal. I testify against my partners. I get a reduced sentence, 10 years instead of 20. You can't do that. They'll kill you. I know. Then what are you going to do? Raphael looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the answer before he spoke. I'm going to disappear, he said quietly. Tonight. Leora's world tilted. What about me? You stay. You're legally separated from my business dealings. My lawyers will make sure of it. You keep the estate, the accounts I set up for you. You'll be protected. I don't want the estate or the accounts. I want you. Leora, don't. She stepped back, her hands shaking. Don't tell me this is for the best. Don't tell me you're protecting me. Just tell me the truth. Are you leaving me? I'm trying to keep you safe. Now, that's not what I asked. Raphael's composure cracked. Yes, I'm leaving, because if I stay, I drag you down with me, and I won't do that. Leora felt like she couldn't breathe. So that's it? You just decided, without asking what I want? I know what you want. You want me to stay, but I can't give you that. Then take me with you. No. Raphael, no. He repeated, firmer this time. You deserve a life. A real one. Not running, not hiding, not constantly looking over your shoulder. I can't give you that if you come with me. And what if that's not what I want? What if I want you, even if it means running? Raphael closed the distance between them and cupped her face in his hands. Then I'm asking you to want something else. For me. Please. Tears spilled down Leora's cheeks. I hate you for this. I know. I won't forgive you. I know that too. He kissed her, desperate and broken, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. When he pulled away, there were tears in his eyes, too. "I love you," he said. "I should have told you sooner, but I love you." Leora sobbed. "Don't say that now, not when you're leaving." "I had to say it once." He let go of her and walked toward the stairs. Leora stood frozen, watching him disappear. 12 hours later, Rafael De Luca was gone. The first week without Rafael felt like drowning in slow motion. Leora wandered through the estate like a ghost, moving from room to room without purpose. His study still smelled like his cologne. His coffee cup sat in the sink, unwashed. Maria had asked if she should clean out his things, and Leora had snapped at her so viciously that Maria hadn't asked again. The authorities came on the third day. Federal agents in dark suits, flashing badges, asking questions Leora answered mechanically. Where was Rafael De Luca? When had she last seen him? Did she have any knowledge of his business operations? Rafael's lawyers were there within the hour, calm and professional, guiding her through every answer. By the end of it, the agents left empty-handed, frustrated, but unable to touch her. The separation Rafael had built into their marriage, the legal protections, the carefully documented autonomy, kept her safe. She hated him for being right. She hated herself for wishing he'd been wrong. Claire came by on the 5th day with a casserole and a bottle of wine. They sat in the kitchen, picking at food neither of them wanted. "You look like hell," Claire said. "Thanks." "I mean it. When's the last time you slept?" Leora shrugged. She couldn't remember. The nights blurred together, hours spent staring at the ceiling, reaching for someone who wasn't there. "He left to protect you," Claire said gently. "You know that, right?" "I know." "Then why are you angry?" "Because he didn't ask me. He just decided I couldn't handle it and left." Leora's voice cracked. "He told me I always had a choice, and then he took it away." Claire reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Men are idiots, even the good ones." Despite everything, Leora laughed. It came out wet and broken, but it was something. The lawyers came back on day 8 with paperwork. Rafael had transferred everything to her: the estate, the legitimate businesses, accounts she didn't know existed. It was all legal, all clean, completely separate from the operations that had gotten him in trouble. "He planned this," the lead lawyer said. "His name was Marcus. Different Marcus, no relation to the one who'd betrayed Rafael. Months ago, maybe longer, he wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of no matter what happened." Leora stared at the papers. "How much?" "Enough that you'll never have to worry about money again. The estate alone is worth—" "I don't care about the money." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. De Luca, is there a way to contact him?" "No, I'm sorry. He was very clear about that." Leora signed the papers because she didn't know what else to do. But that night, alone in the house that suddenly felt too big and too empty, she made a decision. She wasn't going to sit here and grieve. She was going to find him. The first step was Marcus, the real Marcus, the one who'd talked to the authorities. It took Leora 3 days to track down where he was staying, a motel on the outskirts of town, cheap and anonymous. She drove there herself, no security, no backup, just her and a fury that had been building since Rafael left. She knocked on his door at 10 in the morning. When he opened it, his face went pale. "Mrs. De Luca?" "Where is he?" Leora demanded. "I don't know, I swear. I don't—" "You talked to the feds, you gave them everything. You must have some idea where he'd run." Marcus shook his head. "The feds didn't tell me anything. They just took my statement and cut me loose." Leora studied his face. He looked terrible, thin, exhausted, eaten up by guilt. "Your sister," she said. "How is she?" Marcus's expression crumbled. "She died 2 days after I talked to the authorities. The treatment wasn't enough." Leora felt her anger deflate slightly. "I'm sorry. I am too. For what I did, for betraying him. He showed me mercy and I—" Marcus stopped, his voice breaking. "I thought if I gave them enough, they'd leave me alone. But they just kept pushing, and now she's gone and he's gone, and I have to live with what I did." Leora didn't feel sorry for him, but she understood regret, understood making choices that haunted you. "If you hear anything," she said, Anything at all about where he went? You owe him that much. Marcus nodded. I'll call you, I promise. Leora left without another word. The second step was Raphael's people. Most of them had scattered when the indictments came down. Some had been arrested. Others had fled. But a few remained loyal, working in the shadows to keep what was left of Raphael's empire from collapsing entirely. Leora met with them one by one. Some were skeptical. What did the boss's wife know about running an organization? Others were curious. A few were openly hostile. But Leora wasn't trying to run anything. She was trying to find leverage. One of Raphael's men, a guy named Vincent who handled logistics, finally gave her something useful. There's a lawyer in the city, Vincent said, specialist in disappearing people. Raphael used him twice before for high-value assets who needed to vanish. If anyone knows where the boss went, it's him. Name? Harold Greaves, but good luck getting him to talk. Attorney-client privilege and all that. Let me worry about that. Leora drove into the city the next day. Harold Greaves worked out of a nondescript office building, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. She showed up without an appointment and refused to leave until he agreed to see her. When she finally sat across from him, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and expensive suit, she got straight to the point. I need to know where my husband is. I'm afraid I can't help you with that. Can't or won't. Both. Greaves folded his hands on his desk. Even if I did know where Mr. DeLuca was, which I'm not confirming, I couldn't tell you. It would violate every ethical standard I have. He's my husband. And he's my client, who explicitly instructed me not to disclose his location to anyone, including you, especially you. Leora felt like she'd been slapped. He said that? Greaves's expression softened slightly. He said you'd come looking, and that if you did, I should tell you he's safe, that he thinks about you every day, and that the best thing you can do is move on. That's not good enough. It's all I can give you. Leora stood, her hands clenched into fists. Tell me this then. Is he alone? Greaves hesitated. No. He has people with him, people he trusts. Good. Leora turned to leave, then stopped. When you talk to him, because I know you will, tell him I'm not moving on. Tell him I'm going to find him, and when I do, we're going to have words. A smile tugged at Greaves's mouth. I'll pass that along. 3 weeks after Raphael disappeared, Leora got a break. It came from the last place she expected, Eleanor. Her mother showed up at the estate unannounced, looking worse than Leora had ever seen her. She'd lost weight. Her clothes hung off her frame. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. I need help, Eleanor said without preamble. Leora stood in the doorway, blocking her entry. No. Please, I'm sick. The doctors say... Eleanor's voice caught. I need treatment, but I don't have insurance. I don't have money. I have nothing. That's not my problem. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother a long time ago. Eleanor's face twisted. Fine. You want me to beg? I'll beg. Please, Leora, I know I was terrible to you. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway. Leora wanted to slam the door in her face, wanted to tell Eleanor to go to hell, to suffer the way she'd made Leora suffer for 19 years. But she couldn't, because that's not who she was anymore. Come in, she said finally. They sat in the living room. Eleanor looked around at the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the life Leora had built. You've done well for yourself, Eleanor said bitterly. I've survived. There's a difference. Is there? Eleanor looked at her. Your husband's gone. You're alone in this big house. How is that better than what you had before? Because it's my choice, Leora said quietly. I chose to stay when Raphael left. I chose to build a life here. No one forced me. No one sold me. I decided. Eleanor was silent for a moment. I was 17 when I had you. Did you know that? Leora shook her head. Your father left the moment he found out I was pregnant. My parents kicked me out. I had nothing. No education, no money, no support. I raised you alone, and every day was a struggle. Eleanor's voice was thick. I resented you for it. for taking my youth, my freedom, my chances. And I made sure you felt that resentment every single day. That was wrong. I know that now. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest Eleanor had ever come to admitting fault. I'll pay for your treatment, Leora said, but after that, we're done. You don't contact me, you don't ask for more. You don't show up at my house. We're finished. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I refuse to become the kind of person who turns their back on someone who's suffering, even if that someone is you. Eleanor left an hour later with a check and a list of doctors. Leora watched her go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just emptiness. But later that night, going through some of Eleanor's things that she'd left behind, because Eleanor always left things behind, Leora found a receipt for a private investigator, dated 2 weeks ago. Eleanor had been looking for Raphael too. Leora called the number on the receipt. A gruff voice answered. Yeah? My name is Leora Di Luca. You were hired to find my husband. A pause. Who told you that? Doesn't matter. Did you find him? I'm not supposed to. I'll pay you double, whatever Eleanor paid, triple. Just tell me what you found. Another pause. Then, he's in Portugal, small coastal town called Cascais. That's all I got before the trail went cold. Thank you. Leora hung up and booked a flight for the next morning. Portugal was beautiful and foreign and overwhelming. Leora landed in Lisbon and took a taxi to Cascais, a town perched on the edge of the Atlantic with white buildings and narrow streets, and a view that looked like something out of a painting. She had no plan beyond showing up. No idea where Raphael was staying, if he was even still here, if he'd be angry or relieved to see her. She checked into a small hotel and spent the first day just walking, trying to get her bearings. The town was bigger than she'd expected, but small enough that she could cover most of it on foot. On the second day, she started asking questions, showing Raphael's photo to shopkeepers, bartenders, anyone who might recognize him. Most shook their heads. A few looked uncomfortable and refused to answer. On the third day, an old woman running a produce stand studied Raphael's photo for a long time. I know him, she said finally in heavily accented English. He comes here every morning, buys fruit, always tips well. Do you know where he lives? The woman pointed down the street. The blue house, near the water? Leora's heart hammered. Thank you. She found the house 20 minutes later. It was small, modest, nothing like the estate. Blue shutters, a narrow balcony, flowers in window boxes. She stood outside for 10 minutes, trying to decide what to say. Then the door opened and Raphael stepped out. He froze when he saw her. They stared at each other across the distance. He looked different, thinner, a beard he hadn't had before, dressed in jeans and a plain shirt. But his eyes were the same, dark, intense, filled with emotion he'd never been good at hiding. You found me, he said finally. You left a trail. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. Raphael's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Yeah, I did. Leora closed the distance between them. When she was close enough to touch, she slapped him. The crack echoed in the quiet street. Raphael touched his cheek, his expression more resigned than surprised. I deserved that. You deserved worse. Leora's voice shook. You told me I always had a choice, and then you made the biggest decision of our lives without me. I was trying to protect you. I didn't need protection. I needed you. Leora, don't. Don't tell me it was for the best. Don't tell me you had no choice. You always have a choice. You taught me that. Raphael looked away. If I'd stayed, you would have been dragged into the investigation. Your life would have been destroyed. So you destroyed it anyway by leaving. You're not destroyed. You're here. You tracked me across an ocean. You're stronger than you know. I don't want to be strong, Leora said, her voice breaking. I want to be with you. Raphael's composure finally cracked. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking, felt the wetness on her hair that might have been tears. Sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. They stood like that for a long time. When they finally pulled apart, Raphael led her inside. The house was small but comfortable. Simple furniture, a kitchen that smelled like coffee, books stacked on every surface. It was nothing like the life he'd had before. "This is what you gave up everything for?" Leora asked. "Yeah." "Was it worth it?" Raphael looked at her. "No, because I gave up you." They sat on the small couch, close but not touching. "Tell me what happened," Leora said, "after you left." Raphael took a breath. "I had contacts in Europe, people who owed me favors. They got me out of the country, set me up here with a new identity. I've been keeping my head down, trying to figure out what comes next. And what does come next? I don't know. I can't go back to the States. The indictments are still active. If I set foot on American soil, I'll be arrested." "Then I'll stay here." Raphael shook his head. "You can't give up your life for me." "Why not? You gave up yours for me." "That's different." "How?" "Because you have options, friends, a home, a future. I have nothing." "You have me," Leora said fiercely. "Or you could, if you'd stop being an idiot and pushing me away." Raphael laughed, a rough, broken sound. "When did you get so stubborn?" "I learned from you." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "You really want this? A life in hiding? No going home, no seeing your friends, constantly looking over your shoulder? I want you. Everything else we'll figure out. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." Raphael kissed her then, desperate and grateful and full of everything they hadn't said. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I should say it more. I love you." "I love you too, you infuriating, self-sacrificing idiot." He smiled. "I'll take it." They didn't figure everything out that day, or that week, or even that month, but slowly, carefully, they built a life together in that small blue house by the ocean. Leora learned Portuguese, got a job teaching English to local kids, made friends with the woman who ran the produce stand and the couple who owned the cafe down the street. Raphael found work doing consulting for small businesses. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just using the skills he'd developed running an empire to help people manage inventory and logistics. It was quiet, simple, nothing like either of them had known before. But it was theirs. 6 months after Leora arrived, they were having dinner on the balcony when Raphael's phone rang. He checked the screen and his expression shifted. "It's Greaves," he said. "My lawyer." He answered. Leora watched his face carefully, trying to read the conversation from his side of it. "When?" Raphael asked. A pause. "Are you sure?" Another pause. "What does that mean for me?" He hung up and looked at Leora. "Marcus is dead," he said quietly. "The real Marcus, the one who talked. He killed himself last week, left a note confessing that he lied to the authorities, made up most of what he told them. The feds are dropping the charges." Leora's heart stopped. "What?" "It's over. I'm not a fugitive anymore. I can go home." They stared at each other. "Do you want to?" Leora asked. "Go home?" Raphael looked around at the small balcony, the ocean view, the simple life they'd built. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me misses it, the estate, the power, the control. But another part of me—" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Another part of me thinks maybe this is better, simpler, cleaner." "We could go back," Leora said. "Reclaim the estate, start over fresh. You could build something legitimate. Or we could stay here, keep this life. What do you want?" Raphael was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to decide. Whatever you choose, I'm with you." Leora thought about the estate, about Claire and Sarah and the book club and the kids she'd been teaching, about the life she'd started building before everything fell apart. Then she thought about this house, about the produce stand woman who saved them the best oranges, about the quiet mornings and the simple dinners and the way Raphael smiled more here than he ever had before. "Let's stay," she said. "For now. We can always go back later if we want." But right now, I like this. Us. Here. Raphael's smile was genuine, relieved. Yeah? Yeah. They stayed on the balcony until the sun set, talking about what came next. About maybe expanding the house. About taking a trip to Spain. About small, normal things that felt impossibly precious. Well, a year later, Leora stood in the small church in Cascais wearing a dress she'd chosen herself. Raphael waited at the altar in a simple suit. No crowd of strangers, no pressure, no performance. Just Maria, who'd flown in to witness it. Vincent and two other of Raphael's former associates who'd made new lives for themselves. Claire, who'd come with her boyfriend and spent the whole trip taking photos. And a handful of local friends they'd made. The ceremony was short, personal, nothing like the first wedding. When the officiant asked if they took each other, Leora didn't hesitate. I do. Raphael's voice was steady. I do. They exchanged new rings, simple bands they'd picked out together. When Raphael kissed her, there were tears in his eyes. The reception was held at their house. Someone brought wine. Maria made her famous pasta. People danced in the small living room to music from someone's phone. It was imperfect and chaotic and beautiful. Later, after everyone left, Leora and Raphael stood on the balcony looking at the ocean. No regrets? Raphael asked. Not a single one. Even though I dragged you halfway across the world? You didn't drag me. I chose to come. Big difference. Raphael pulled her close. What do you think the next year will bring? I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. Together, Raphael repeated. It became their promise, their anchor, the thing they came back to when things got hard or uncertain or overwhelming. Together. 2 years after that, Leora opened a school. It started small, just her and 3 other teachers, working with local kids who struggled with reading. But it grew. Raphael helped her navigate the bureaucracy, set up the funding, find a building. The DeLuca Learning Center opened on a sunny morning in April. Leora stood outside with Raphael, watching kids stream through the doors, and felt something she'd never expected. Pride. Your sister would be proud too, she said quietly. Raphael's hand tightened on hers. Yeah, she would. They'd talked about her more over the years, about the life she should have had, about how her death had shaped everything Raphael became. I'm thinking about starting a fund, Raphael said, for girls in bad situations. Help them get out before it's too late. That's a good idea. It won't bring her back. No, but it might save someone else. Raphael looked at her. When did you get so wise? I learned from you. I'm a criminal. You were a criminal. Now you're just a guy who runs a consulting business and helps his wife run a school. Totally boring. Raphael laughed. I can live with boring. They went inside and spent the day with the kids, teaching, learning, building something that mattered. That night, back at their house, Leora found Raphael in their small office going through paperwork for the fund he wanted to start. You're really doing this, she said. Yeah, I am. It's going to be expensive. We have the money. It's going to be hard. Most things worth doing are. Leora sat on the edge of his desk. You know what I think? What? I think you're trying to make up for the past, and I think that's impossible. But I also think you're going to try anyway because that's who you are. Raphael set down his pen. Is that a criticism? No, it's an observation. And also, she leaned down and kissed him. I'm going to help you. You don't have to. I want to. We're a team, remember? Together, Raphael said. Together, Leora agreed. 5 years after Raphael disappeared from the United States, they went back for the first time. The charges had been dropped years ago, but Raphael had been hesitant to return. Too many memories, too many ghosts. But when Maria called to say she was retiring and wanted them there for her party, Raphael couldn't say no. They flew into the city and drove out to the estate. It looked the same, but different. Maria had kept it maintained, but it felt like a museum now, a relic of a life that no longer existed. The party was small, Vincent and his wife. A few other former associates who'd gone straight. Claire, who'd gotten married and had a baby. Sarah and Jessica, who ran a successful catering company now. They spent the evening catching up, sharing stories, laughing about old times. Later, Leora found herself in the library. Her library. The place she'd spent so many hours when she first came here, lost and scared and trying to figure out who she was. Raphael found her there. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just remembering. Do you miss it, this life?" Leora looked around at the expensive furniture, the shelves of books, the grandeur of it all. "No," she said honestly. "I miss the person I was becoming here, but I like who I am now better." "Who are you now?" "Someone who makes her own choices. Someone who isn't afraid anymore. Someone who loves you not because she has to, but because she wants to." Raphael crossed the room and pulled her close. "I love you too, in case that wasn't clear. It's pretty clear." They stood there in the library holding each other, and Leora thought about how far they'd both come. From that church where she'd walked down the aisle toward a stranger, to this moment, standing in the ruins of his old life and choosing each other anyway. "Ready to go home?" Raphael asked. Home, not the estate, not this place with all its memories and ghosts. Home was a small blue house in Portugal with a balcony overlooking the ocean. "Yeah," Leora said. "Let's go home." 10 years after their wedding in the church, Leora stood on their balcony watching the sunrise. Raphael came out with 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." "Thinking about something?" "Everything. How we started, where we are now, how much has changed." Raphael leaned against the railing beside her. "Any regrets?" "Just one." He looked at her concerned. "What?" "I wish we'd had more time, that we'd figured this out sooner. We figured it out at exactly the right time. Any sooner and we wouldn't have been ready." Leora considered that. He was probably right. She'd needed time to become someone who could stand on her own. Raphael had needed time to learn that strength didn't always mean control. "What about you?" she asked. "Any regrets?" "That I didn't tell you I loved you sooner. That I wasted time trying to protect you instead of trusting you to make your own choices." He paused. "And that I ever left. Even though I know why I did it, even though it worked out, I still regret those months without you. We got them back. All of them and more." "Yeah, we did." They stood in comfortable silence watching the sun climb higher. The school was thriving now. Over 100 students, 10 teachers. Raphael's fund had helped dozens of girls escape bad situations. They'd built something real, something that mattered. And they'd built it together. Not because they had to. Not because one saved the other or out of obligation or guilt. Because they chose each other every single day. That was the thing about freedom, Leora had learned. It wasn't just about having options. It was about making choices and living with them. It was about deciding who you wanted to be and refusing to let anyone else write that story for you. Raphael had given her the freedom to choose. And she'd chosen him. Not as a savior, not as a captor, not as someone who defined her worth, as an equal. A partner. Someone who challenged her and supported her and loved her for exactly who she was. "I have something for you," Raphael said suddenly. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Leora opened it. It was the document he'd given her at their wedding, the one granting her freedom. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked. "Because I want you to destroy it. Raphael, you don't need it anymore. You were never trapped. You know that now. So destroy it, burn it, whatever you want. You're free because you choose to be, not because a piece of paper says so." Leora looked at the document, the thing that had started everything, that had changed the trajectory of her entire life. Then she tore it in half. Raphael smiled. "Feel good?" "Yeah, it does." She tore it again and again, until it was nothing but scraps that scattered in the ocean breeze. They both watched the pieces flutter away. "What now?" Raphael asked. Leora turned to face him fully. "Now we keep going, keep building, keep choosing each other." "For how long?" "For as long as we want to. Which, if you're asking," She reached up and kissed him. Is forever. Raphael kissed her back, slow and certain. When they pulled apart, he was smiling that rare, genuine smile she loved so much. Forever sounds good, he said. And it was. Not perfect, not without struggle or doubt or hard days, but it was real. It was theirs. It was chosen, and that made all the difference.